everybody, welcome to the Comic Game Movie Show. My name is Deshaun, and today I'm here to talk about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Specifically, I'm here to talk about the response to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's mixed response. And since I've seen the movie, I have gone back and forth between an 8 and an 8.5. And I've settled on an 8, but like at times when I sit back and think about it, it can be easily an 8.5. There are moments in this movie that are 9s, but there are only a couple, but there are few and far in between that are in that level of excellence. And the more I've sat back and thought about the movie, and the more I started looking around, is this movie has a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. It could be lower than that, actually, right now. But I don't think it's going to be a rotten film, but it's, you know, it's not the high caliber that you would expect from a sequel to an MCU film. The MCU has been very good at, with the sequels. You know, Thor Ragnarok, Captain America Civil War, the Avengers sequels, and, you know, things of that nature. And, you know, but, like, this movie, to me, is going to end up being in a category, because I think the original Ant-Man and the Wasp is actually a bit better than the first one. Like, it builds on the first one. It's not quite as, like, the things that, like, not the things that work in the first one work in that one, but it's not quite as, but, like, it's not as surprising now. So, like, maybe your standard, it's kind of like John Wick 1 and John Wick 2. I think John Wick 1's the best of the John Wick series, but that's not because the other movies aren't as good as John Wick 1. It's because of the shock of John Wick 1 being so good, being so different, being so unique, being so out there, that it was just like, whoa. So the sequels, like, you know, they're just building upon what already happened, but they're not doing anything to change, you know, they're not completely revolutionizing what happened. They're just building on what happened. So it's like, okay, it's still great, but, you know, it's just not that shocking, oh my gosh, that it was. And the thing about it is, so far, the best sequels in the MCU have all been when they get a new director who completely changes the tone, who goes in a different direction. So far, most of them, you know, getting Taika to come on and do Thor, obviously getting the Russos to come on and do Winter Soldier. In my opinion, Iron Man 3 is a great sequel. It's a great sequel, and I think it's, you know, it's on par with the original Iron Man because they got Shane Black. But really what I wanted to talk about is that it is very interesting seeing the response. First of all, I've said for a little bit now, I've commented in places on Twitter and whatnot, that this movie is, it's not getting the reaction critically that I was hoping it would get. And after seeing the movie, I completely understand, because the structure of the film is a bit, either it's loose, or you can say there's not a lot of meat on the bone. Like, the actual plot is very simple, and there are no major twists. There isn't any, like, this movie could, like, it's not like Captain America Winter Soldier, you know what I mean? It's not like Black Panther, where there's this narrative, and where the narrative structure is structured so, narratively it's structured well. I even think I said somewhere, somebody I follow on here probably posted something up about, like, which movie, the original Doctor Strange or this, and I was like, this Doctor Strange is more creative, it's more out there, it's more director driven, because it has its own unique tone to it that is very unique, the most unique thing in the MCU. But I do think the original Doctor Strange had a better structure, it was easier to follow, and, you know, you knew all the stuff. And while film people and hardcore comic book people might have had a problem with that, the general audiences loved it. The original Doctor Strange has like an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. The original Doctor Strange has has almost the same score, audience score as this one. It has a better cinema score than the Doctor Strange of the Multiverse of Madness. Almost everything about the original Doctor Strange is higher scored than has higher scores than the Multiverse of Madness outside of the box office. But that could be chopped up to the spectacle of it all and to the building, growing, you know, ever growing MCU universe and the cameos and whatnot. I mean, this is a spoiler discussion, so I'll just straight up tell you. Professor X shows up in this. I mean, Patrick Stewart shows up in this as a Professor X. I mean, as a fucking, like, as almost the X-Men, the animated series Professor X. I mean, Reed Richards, aka John Krasinski, shows up as Reed Richards. They even got the one that shocked the hell out of me was what's it? Is it Anston Mount or Onston Mount? I can't remember his name, but the guy who played Black Bolt in the old Inhuman show, that terrible Inhuman show. And I thought Anston Mount was like a really good choice for that, So it was awesome to see him come back and get another shot to play Black Bolt in this. And obviously the Captain Marvel with Maria Rambeau and Captain Carter, that was dope. Like, there were some really cool ideas and cool concepts, and with this Illuminati and whatnot. But even watching the movie, when I took a step back, I was like, while it didn't feel as egregious as, say, when I saw the Scream movie, the recent Scream movie that came out like a month or two ago, I remember saying, like, these cameos or these characters coming back felt so forced. They didn't really need to be there. Outside of Dewey, who did great, Will Arnett, is it Will Arnett? I think it's Will Arnett. Whatever. He fit coming back, and he fit the story, and it made sense. But everyone else, Sydney, all the other the characters who came back, it didn't feel right. It felt forced. It felt like this is unnecessary. It didn't need to happen. And in this movie, it didn't feel like it was unnecessary, these characters showing up. What it felt like is you're not going far enough. Like, if you're gonna do this, you need to go further with it. Like, this movie should have been Captain America Civil War. It should have been this massive movie with so many characters, with different characters in it, with many characters in the MCU in it, and it should have been this insanity thing, like this thing that would just forever change the MCU. But in the end, when the movie kind of wraps up, it's very isolated. So, like, you don't really know how many people even know these events even went down. So it's not really this big altering, changing thing in the MCU at all. And actually, Doctor Strange doesn't even wrap up. Like, in my mind, when this movie was first announced, I was like, okay, this is going to be the culmination of the Multiverse of Madness. I was thinking this is going to be a big Civil War level kind of film. And I felt like Spider-Man No Way Home reached that level of Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, and like these levels of like, this movie is going to forever like alter the MCU. Whereas with so much power being thrown around in this movie, nothing's really changed or altered at all. Which I don't have a problem with it being isolated like this, but the way you feel about it is one of those anticipation things where I felt like this was going to be this over huge movie. And what it ended up being is a movie that left a lot on the table. It's the opposite for me, it's the opposite of the Batman. It's the opposite of Eternals. Because when I got done watching the Eternals and Batman, I remember being like, there's stuff you could have taken out of this movie. You could have streamlined it. Like, I remember watching Eternals and being like, there could have been a couple characters you could have cut out and just teased to appear in a sequel. Maybe you could have cut Kingo out. Maybe you could have cut, Druid out. Maybe, like, I don't know. I'm just spitballing. There are characters who could have been cut out. Maybe could have cut out Athena. There are characters who could have been cut out to streamline the movie a bit more so that you can, focus more on the plot and more other things and really focus on these individual characters, and then maybe come back to these characters in the sequel, and then they're all there, and now that we know these characters, we can deal with these other characters, or make it into a show. Whereas with the Batman, I felt kind of similar. I thought that you could have cut out everything with Catwoman, and the movie could have been a lot could have been shorter, more streamlined, and it might have made even more money. I'm gonna tell you, if they cut Catwoman stuff out, shorten this shit up by like 24 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes, I'm telling you, the Batman would have made an extra $100 million. It just would have made an extra $100 million just because they could have put it in more theaters. And with this movie, it's almost the opposite, where I'm like, this movie needs an extra 20, maybe even 30 minutes. This should have been that big of a movie, because if you look at Captain America Civil War, that movie's like an hour, and like 2 hours and 30 minutes. You look at Spider-Man, that movie's like 2 hours and 35 minutes. You could have, like, this was a movie, like, while Eternals, I thought, needed to pick a lane and maybe slim itself down to pick a lane, or it needed to be a show. This movie needed more time. There are concepts they're playing with, ideas they're playing with that you really can't get into because it's only a 2-hour movie. It's less than 2 hours, actually. It's probably like an hour and 58 minutes, 57 minutes, give or take. It's not even a 2-hour movie. And at first, I was like, I wasn't really worried about it because I was like, well, maybe they're not going to do Like, but because I was like, well, maybe they have a narrative that they want to, they just want to get to. But after watching the movie, I could definitely, tell you right now, they could have used more time. They could have taken their time with certain aspects. We definitely should have spent more time with America Chavez and gotten into what happened with her parents and whatnot, and maybe made that. And the thing about it is, it's not like I didn't need the movie to be like insanely over the top and creative. Like, it's a Marvel movie, it's an MCU movie, they can only push it but so far. But the fact of the matter is, like, they really didn't do a lot with the plot. There was so much left to be done with this film that they didn't do. And it started to make, and the thing about it is, and I'm curious about this, is it because it was more director driven? Because so far, and I made this comment before, all of the movies that I've done so-so or been controversial, the most controversial movies in the MCU, in terms of like controversy, is Iron Man 3, The Eternals, and now Doctor Strange. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these movies are controversial, and you know what? These are more director-driven movies. Even like WandaVision and not WandaVision, but even Moon Knight to a certain degree is more director-driven. And it's very controversial. And it's not to make me think this, and I posted this up earlier, that I don't think people actually want the okay, no, let me say this. The wider audience, the wider general audience at large, who aren't me, who aren't you, who aren't people who are in the know, who aren't people who watch this comic book stuff all the time, aren't people who know the comics, aren't people who watch the older movies so they get these references. The John Krasinski thing means nothing to those people. Anson Mount showing up as Black Bolt means nothing to those people. Like, you know what I mean? The biggest pop is going to come from Xavier, Professor X, Charles Xavier, get showing up. Maybe you get a pop there. But those people don't know about this other stuff, like these details and these words. And I said it in my first review that this movie is so dedicated to just MCU people. If you've been watching the MCU, you get it. But it's so isolating. It's a very isolating movie. And then you make this movie that's isolating, and then you have a director doing his own style. It's like I'm starting to take a step back and go, you know what? And it's not a coincidence that this movie, Eternals, and even in Eternals, Iron Man 3, and in Moon Knight to a degree, they're all very isolated movies where you don't really hear them talk about the other expanded cinematic universe. And I'm curious if, okay, Doctor Strange does. Doctor Strange is steeped in the cinematic universe, but it's still so isolated. And I'm curious if that's really gonna have a profound effect on the box office. Like, this movie's gonna do great this opening weekend. It might even reach $200 million. But I'm thinking this movie's gonna fall very hard. The audience score it's high. It's like in the 80s. But it's not like in the 90s, you know what I mean? It's not like, even Black Widow, for all the stuff people said, was in the 90s audience score, which means general audiences were entertained and had a great time with the Black Widow movie. In fact, Cinema Score, which is, I've often said this, maybe I haven't said it enough, Cinema Score is the real audience score. Because the Cinema Score guys ask people when they come out of the theaters. They ask like over 100, like it's some crazy number, like 500 people after they leave the theater, what did they think of the movie? Like, what would they score the movie? And after asking like people coming right out of the theater, and they kind of show up at random theaters, so it's not like one of those things where it's like people can fake it. They just ask people what they thought. And Black Widow got like an A, an A-, which is a good score. Eternals, it's not. I don't know if it's a coincidence that Eternals and this Doctor Strange got a B+, which is literally the average score. The average cinema score is a B+, which is for an average movie, which is when people walk out and they're like, I had an okay time with that movie. And that seems to be the consensus. I don't see a lot of people who love this movie. There are, but amongst the big reviewers and big people, people who've been claimed to be bought by Marvel and who are biased towards Marvel, amongst them, the best, most people are like, I had a fun time with this movie, but it's not great. And that's the thing that upsets me about this movie, is this movie was supposed to be, like I said, that next level MCU movie. I'm talking about, this movie was supposed to be on par with No Way Home. And I can tell you right now, it's not as good as No Way Home. It isn't. And like, it disappointed me because I was hoping it would be. I hoping it would be better than No Way Home, but it's not. And it just kind of makes me think that maybe the MCU should rethink this whole director-driven thing. And, you know, maybe they should. Like, if the movie makes a ton of money, makes over $1 billion, you know, sure, we're fine, we'll just keep going. But, like, I'm thinking to myself that the response audiences are having to the MCU doing drastically different things is very mixed. And it's making me go, I don't know what the MCU should do. Because the MCU has made its money on pleasing the audience at large. Not just the critics, not just the fandom or the fans, the audience at large. And if making these decisions to let the directors drive, to do these crazy, you know, very creative ideas, to throw these out there, is gonna push away the general audience, then I can't imagine there won't be any clapback from Disney at large. Maybe Iger might have been patient, but I'm not sure Chapek will be as patient. They're thinking these results should be the same, that we should be getting the same response. And if the common denominator is being more creative, giving more to the directors and whatnot, if that's the common denominator that's like hurting these films' reactions, then Feige might have to go back to doing things the old way. To having to go in like, because Doctor Strange is definitely 70% Sam Raimi. And maybe he might have to pull it back and give him that 40%. Because I've often said that's most MCU movies. It's 40% the director, 60%, you know, Marvel Studios themselves. Maybe he needs to go back to doing that. Because clearly, giving the reins completely over to the directors is getting mixed results. It is getting a mixed response. Whether you believe it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, money talk, like, you know, reactions and money talking. And every time the MCU gives complete and utter reign over to a director, it tends to not work out too well. But anyways, thank you guys for the Comic Game Movie Show. Please like, subscribe. What do you think? Is there a problem right now? Should the MCU go back to its old ways? Should they stay the course? Or, you know, you gotta be unbiased here. Take your own likes and dislikes out of the equation. If you ever have this product and you make a change, and the reaction is that, and then the reaction, and you go from getting A's to getting B's and C's, you are gonna have a reaction. Take your biases out of it and look at it from a very, you know, from a very subjective standpoint. If you are the MCU, are you thinking about trying to shift and go back to the way things used to be? If you guys are on the Comic Game Movie Show, please like, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.